Hi, this is Dr. Martin's supplemental lecture on roots. This is the second part on plants for the supplemental lectures. And I'm going to talk first about, we're going to look at a longitudinal section of a root, and then we're going to look at a cross-section of a mature root. So this is actually showing you a growing root, and let's take a look at some of the structures. At the very tip of the root is a cluster of cells that makes up what is called a root cap, and it has a protective function to protect the cells behind it from injury as it grows through the soil. There's a cluster of cells just behind the root cap that are very special cells. These are called meristematic tissue, or this tissue is called meristematic tissue, or sometimes it's just referred to as a meristem. And that is a group of cells that has the ability to continue to divide throughout the life of the plant. And there's only certain locations in a plant where cells are still able to grow after the plant is somewhat mature. And this is one of them, is in the root. Just behind the meristematic tissue, we're going to see an area, or what actually, right in here, including that, is what we call the zone of cell division. So this is the area in which cells are dividing, and as the root grows downward, behind it, there's a second zone that we call zone of elongation. And this is where cells actually elongate to help push the root further down. And then a little bit further up, right in here, this is where we have the zone of maturation, or sometimes zone of differentiation. And that simply means that's the zone where the cells are no longer able to divide rapidly. They've become adult cells, so to speak, and they've taken on specific functions. So this is where we see some of the epidermal cells giving rise to root hairs. We also see xylem and phloem tissue and so on. So these are the different areas in a growing root. We're going to take a look at a cross-section of a mature root, and I'm going to focus on just one group of plants. And I think I'll erase this. When we look at the flowering plants, or the angiosperms, there are about 270,000 species. They can be divided into two main groups, and you might have heard these terms before. There's one group called the monocots, and a second group called the eudicots, or sometimes, or in the past, have been just called the dicots. There are several differences between these two groups, but just to explain examples of plants that you're familiar with, the monocots include the grasses as well as grains. They have only one cotyledon that emerges from the seed when they germinate. Eudicots are the other group. So trees, herbaceous plants, everybody else, and they actually have two cotyledons that emerge during germination, two embryonic leaves, if you will. There's many other differences here, but we're going to focus simply because of shortness of time. We don't have a lot of time to go into both groups, so we're going to stick with the eudicots. And therefore, when we look at cross-sections of stems and of the root, I'm going to focus on that group. So over here, I have a diagram of showing you some of the structures of the root of a eudicot. So we'll put eudicot root, and this is a cross section. And actually, I should put some little root hairs here. Okay, so we have in this section, if we start from the periphery and work our way in, there's a single layer of cells that makes up the epidermis. Inside of that is a fairly large area of cells that are mostly parenchymal cells, and they constitute what's called the cortex of the root. And then in the very center is the vascular tissue. And surrounding the vascular tissue, shown here in red, is a special layer of cells. It's called the endodermis, and these cells have a waxy substance. On their cell walls, and this is important in regulating the entry of substances into the vascular tissue. If we look at this is sometimes called the stele, S-T-E-L-E. If we take a look at this structure, in the eudicots we usually see kind of an X-shape arrangement, and I'll draw these, of cells that make up the xylem. And because they're fairly large cells, they're pretty easy to distinguish. And in between those vessel elements are smaller cells that constitute the phloem. Okay, so when water and other substances, as they pass in the root hairs, they mostly move along the cell walls between cells. So they make their way into here, and at this point, because of that waxy layer, they usually have to at this point enter via special membrane transporters. And other specialized transport mechanisms. So this is where the cell is going to control what actually goes into the vascular tissue. Okay, I think that that's everything that I wanted to talk about with regard to the roots. Again, we have an area in the root that is still capable of growth, and that's called the meristem, or meristematic tissue, and that's what allows the roots to continue to grow outward into the soil to seek water and minerals, other nutrients.